What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're finally changing the front shocks on the 2006 325xi. Putting in two new Bilstein shocks. We're just using the same springs or coils, whatever, again. But that one's for the other side. But this side, the passenger side, we already changed it. So I'm just going to go over real quick what you need. You're going to need these to compress the springs when you take it off. You can get these for like $30 off of eBay or Amazon, and it's called like a spring compressor or shock compressor or whatever. But yeah, they're pretty cheap. 18 millimeter, 17 millimeter, and a 13 millimeter. And then you're gonna need two different sockets, 18 mil and 16 millimeter. The 16 millimeter is for the control arm link right here, and then the 18 millimeter is for down here. That actually releases this, which releases the shock. 14 millimeter right here, and you just put a socket on here and turn, and then you put your 17 millimeter wrench back in here, like right behind it, to hold the bolt that's in the back. And you basically hold the bolt in the back while you turn the nut off. And that's for your control arm link. And then after you do that, you're going to want to grab a flat screwdriver, and right here's your brake line. All you have to do is take it off of this bracket right here. So just go in here with a flat screwdriver and pry this clip upwards until it comes off completely. Just make sure that you don't puncture your brake line or anything like that. Yeah, just looks like that. And then just pull your brake line out. Just pull it towards you, just like that. And then basically this bracket is held on by this bolt right here. And then you need an 18 mil socket for the bolt on the bottom there. But yeah, if you take this nut off here, that's going to release your shock and this bracket. And I'm going to take this bracket off and just leave it off, because all it does is hold this brake line, and this brake line doesn't really need any more support. It's not going to hit anything. And the same with these two lines. This is your brake caliper sensor line, and then this is your wheel bearing sensor line. But all three of these are supported by from up here and down here, and this bracket is basically pointless. I've already taken them off before, and it never rubs through the wiring or anything because it doesn't hit anything. You can just leave it right here and it'll stay. So just pull to get them off of here. I'm just going to take it out so it's even. That way I can hit it with a hammer if I want to. With a hammer to loosen it up. And now that I think about it, I actually do have to take it off all the way. That way I can get that bracket off that I was talking about. There we go. I'm just going to take this nut off again. Get to it. Okay, so I took this sway bar link nut off completely now, and so now everything on the bottom here is loose. It's really not that much to take apart. All you got to take loose is these three nuts on the top, and those are 13 millimeter. So let's grab the 13 mil. You actually want to take the back two nuts off first. That way they come off easier. That way, for the back two nuts, you can just loosen them until they get very loose, and then you can just take them off with your fingers. If you take the front one off first, or whichever one you take off last is going to come off the hardest, because it's going to come off hard all the way. Up here, doesn't really matter. It can only go on one way, so yeah. Just going to set that to the side. Just remember to put that back on before you put it back in, obviously. And right inside there is where the nut is that you take off in order to take it apart. But first, I'm going to grab these and put them on here. We're going to use these to compress the coil springs. That way the thing doesn't fly apart once we take that nut off. Because if you take the nut off without putting these on, the thing's going to literally fly apart and could easily injure you or somebody else. So I put one side on and just made it snug. Basically just make sure the bottom's locked into here and the top's locked into here. And then you take your ratchet or whatever and just tighten it up. And obviously the more you tighten it up, the tighter it gets. You want to compress it a little bit, but not too extremely much that it doesn't pop off again. And then you want to put the other one on the other side and compress this side, and you want to put it exactly on the opposite side. That way it compresses evenly. And then you kind of want to do compress one a little bit and then compress the other one. Just take turns, that way it compresses evenly. So I got them on there and got it compressed as much as I think it needs to be. You obviously don't have to compress it, all together. You just need to make it tight enough so there isn't any pressure on the bottom here. See that gap in the spring there? And here's the gap as well. Here it's still down there, but I can tell that there's not really any pressure in there anymore. This old shock right here, it doesn't even come up anymore. It's supposed to have pressure upwards, and it literally doesn't even work at all. So right here's the new one. If I can press it, then it comes back up. So that's what it's supposed to do. And like the rubber cover and stuff in here, I didn't get new ones for this for these, but I would definitely recommend, if you're changing your shocks, I would definitely recommend getting a new cover like this, the rubber part. And then there's also like a rubber part up here. Sometimes you can get them together, but sometimes they're two different parts. So I would recommend getting this as well. That way you have a new one to make sure that no dirt and stuff gets into your shocks. Just line this thing up to where it goes. This thing here should be right here. And then just loosen it slowly. I also want to put this thing back on first. But you got your big washer here. The small end of it faces towards you, and the flat end goes down. So this thing goes on just like this. There is a bearing in here, so you don't really want to get any dirt in there. You don't have to. Put the nut back on. Make sure you start the nut before you tighten it up with your socket. Pop your cap back on. Now loosen it, and while you're loosening it, this thing here is going to move, so just make sure that you move this to where you need it. Now I'm going to turn it, make sure that this lines up here. And that's pretty much it. So now just put your plate back on. There's only one way you can put it on because there's a hole or there's a nipple right here. So that's the only way you can put it on. So you don't have to worry about putting it on wrong because there's only one way to do it. So yeah. So now all you do is pop it back in. There's only one way to put it back in as well. So just look at right here, you got your nipple right here. So you just line that up with the top here. On the top, and the hole is right here, so just line those two up. I just want to tell you guys again that before you tighten everything up, you want to make sure that you put this nut back in here in first. Because if you, like if I tightened this thing up all the way, then this bolt would come up too far, then you couldn't put this nut on. Because it's all tightened up. The top three there, and now I'm just going to come down here to the bottom. What I'm going to do is actually use another jack to pick this up in order to get it all the way back up in there. So I just smashed it up in there. Basically just pull up on your rotor here and just push it up in here as far as you can with your hands, and then while you're doing that, make sure that you come back in here and line up. There's two pins on your shock right there. There's like two pins that stick out from the side of the shock, and you got to make sure that they line up with this groove here. That way it actually goes in once you jack it up. So I'm just going in here with this jack. You can just go under your lower control arm right there. You can't go on your rotor, but it's not as good because you could potentially damage your rotor and stuff like that. But so basically, make sure that your pins back in here are lined up with the groove, and then you can always jack it up a little bit and just see if it goes. See if it keeps going in. And then basically just go a little bit at a time until it goes in all the way. But like now, I'm going to check it to make sure my pins are lined up. They are lined up, so it should be good. If it sticks a little bit, just take a hammer and tap on the side, and then just put more pressure on it. And for some reason this side is going in harder than the other side. Yeah, I got like all the weight on it right now, and it's not even all the way in. So I'm gonna back it off again and loosen that bolt a little bit, which I'm just gonna come over here, put this nut back on. Part of the way, I'm just gonna hammer on it. Oh, yeah, there it went in. So I'm pretty sure it's all the way in right now, but tap on it a little more just to make sure. Damn, yeah. So right there it popped again. I'm like 90% sure that it's all the way in right now because it can't really go any further. This is what it looks like once it's all the way in. It does depend what shocks you have, or like what brand of shocks. Like the stock shocks actually didn't come down quite as far, just because the bottom of these shocks are just a little longer for some reason. But these are aftermarket Bilstein shocks. So, yeah, I mean, they're just a little bit longer on the bottom part, which is like here are the old ones. This bottom part here sticks out the bottom, and the top part here is what holds it. So, I mean, this doesn't hold it at all. But basically, the new ones I bought are just a little longer. The part down here is just a little longer. But, yeah. So that's basically all you got to do. I mean, as long as you got jack it up and put like the weight of the car on it, and yeah, hit it a couple times, it should pop right in. And then all you got to do is tighten up this nut again all the way, and just make sure you tighten this thing up while you still have the jack under it. That way it doesn't slip out again. So I put this nut back on, tighten it up, and just make sure that you can either torque it down or just use a long ratchet. That way you can get a good leverage on it, because you want to make it pretty tight so it doesn't just pop back out when you're driving down the road. Now, to get this control arm link back in, as you can see, it's not lining up right now. So when I release the jack, it's going to go down, and it should line up once I release the jack. So I just released the jack until it lined up perfectly. Got it in. Just going to put the nut back on, tighten it back up, and yeah, that's pretty much it. After that, basically the only thing you got left to do is put your tire back on, and that's it. Okay, so the tire's back on, and yeah, everything's done. Yeah, basically all I did is put the tire back on and took the jack off, but I already drove it, and it drives a whole lot better than it did before. Both of the front shocks were horrible. I also did change the rear in the other video, the rear shocks. But yeah, I did the front two shocks, and before, every time you hit a bump or something, the steering wheel would like shake back and forth, and the whole car would like, yeah, just shake, because the shocks obviously weren't working. So it didn't keep the car from shaking once you hit a pothole or something. But yeah, so that's it for this video. Like and subscribe. Comment down below if you have any questions. I hope it helped you out a lot, and thanks a lot for watching.